Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington. We begin with breaking news, with the White House publicly releasing the full text of its agreement with Iran to halt the war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump both touted and at times seemed to downplay the agreement during a press conference today at the G7 summit in France. At the same time as the president was holding that news conference, a senior administration official was reading the 14-point memorandum of understanding to reporters during a phone briefing. So here are the main points. Point one, the termination of all military operations, including in Lebanon, where Iran's proxy Hezbollah operates. Point two, both sides agreeing to respect each other's sovereignty. Point three, the clock starts on 60 days of negotiations. Point four, the U.S. ends its naval blockade of Iran's ports. Point five, Iran agrees to reopen the Strait of Hormuz toll-free. Point six includes $300 billion in economic relief for Iran's reconstruction. Point seven lays out a pathway for all types of U.S. sanctions to be lifted over time, of course, once Iran meets certain benchmarks. And point eight mirrors prior public statements by Iran that it will not produce or develop nuclear weapons. At that press conference today, President Trump renewed his threat to bomb Iran if it doesn't abide by the text and other unspecified, unwritten agreements. Take a look.
If it doesn't get done in 60 days, that's all right. We go back to bombing. You know, I don't want to do that because it's so good. But we might have to, because we're never going to let them have a nuclear weapon. But they've agreed not to, and you'll see that very clearly in the agreement. And by the way, if they don't honor the agreement, or some things aren't even mentioned in the agreement, it's a memorandum of understanding, but we have an understanding of certain things without writing it. And if they don't honor that, we'll probably go back to bombing them until they honor it. You know, it's amazing what bombs can do.
So you're threatening to bomb Iran if they don't comply, but there's nothing enforceable in the deal itself. Is that correct?
Doesn't have to be. I let them know. I said, look, if you don't adhere to the agreement, I don't want to do that, but we're going to bomb the hell out of you. And I don't think that they're going to veer from the agreement. What else am I going to do? Am I going to say I'm going to take you to court? Let me take you to court. Let me sue you. No, we're going to bomb the hell out of them if they violate the agreement. I don't want them to. I want them to honor the agreement.
Is there any safeguard in this deal to prevent Iran from charging what they say could be fees after the 60-day extension?
No, the thing that's going to stop them from doing that, because you can't cover everything in a document, is common sense. They don't want to get bombed. They don't want to get hit.
Notably not in the agreement is anything about addressing Iran's ballistic missile threat. Now, remember, President Trump said at the start of the war that that issue was a major reason the U.S. began combat operations in the first place. Take a look at that.
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground.
It's a stark contrast to what the president said today, where he seemed to soften his stance on Iran's ballistic missile capabilities. NBC's Garrett Hake pressed the president on that point.
So we'll be working on a parallel effort with the Gulf nations to address non-nuclear issues, such as the conventional ballistic missiles, which we'll be talking about, and support. I mean, they have to have some because other people have some. You got to have some.
Why is it acceptable to you now that they keep some of that capability? And Iran is...
What are they keeping? What are they keeping? They have less than other nations now. We knocked out probably 85% of their missiles. The rest of them are underground. They can't even get them out.
Joining me now to start us off, NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is covering the president's trip in Geneva. NBC's Matt Bradley is in Tel Aviv. NBC's Sahil Kapur is on Capitol Hill. And here with me on set, NBC's Dan Luce and Elise Labott, host of the Cosmopolitics podcast. Thanks to all of you for starting us off. Gabe, let me start with you. The president did not reveal many new details about this agreement, but what are you hearing from administration officials about this memorandum of understanding?
Well, Kristen, it was a remarkable series of developments this afternoon when we did hear from those senior U.S. officials about some of the details of this memorandum of understanding. And importantly was the financial aspect of this. You mentioned some of this in your introduction, but in addition to that $300 billion reconstruction fund that is to be created by Iran's Arab neighbors, but also to be developed by the U.S., although the administration insists that no U.S. money will be used for that reconstruction fund. In addition to that, there's the issue of sanctions relief. And immediately, some of that relief, at least waivers for Iranian oil exports, will kick in immediately upon the signing of this memorandum of understanding. That is very significant. It wouldn't kick in at the end of this 60-day window of future negotiations. Those waivers of Iranian oil, which had been sanctioned, that will kick in immediately. And a senior U.S. official on that phone call with reporters defended that, saying that, one, it would be easier to keep track of some of the oil that Iran was selling, but also he acknowledged that it was a concession in part to keep the price of oil globally down. So that is extremely significant. And then also the idea of the president today coming back during that press conference and saying that he seemed to be okay with the unfreezing of Iranian funds. That is incredible to hear from the president, considering that he has spent so much time, really much of the last 10 years, railing against the Obama administration for unfreezing Iranian funds as part of a previous Iran nuclear deal. So a lot of developments here that the administration is trying to defend. And yes, we did hear that memorandum of understanding from those senior U.S. officials just as the president was wrapping up that news conference, Kristen.
Yeah, just extraordinary timing on all of these developments, Gabe. I also want to play an exchange at the end of the news conference when the president was asked about whether he would stay in Europe to sign the agreement. Here's what he said.
Why not stick around for the signing ceremony with this Iran peace deal?
I might.
You might?
Yeah, I might. But I'd rather, this is a memorandum of understanding. It's very important, but it might not be the kind of a document that I should be signing.
There's some element to this where you send the vice president. If it works out, great, you look like a genius for sending him. And if it doesn't work out, it's the vice president's fault.
I like that idea, sure. What? This way, if it works out, I'm going to take the credit. If it doesn't work out, I'm blaming J.D. You better be careful, J.D. He's going to turn his plane around and get the hell out of here. Yeah, I like that idea.
Seem to be joking a bit there, Gabe, but what are your sources telling you about the reality of, is the president trying to make the vice president own this?
Look, Kristen, there was certainly a lot of palace intrigue there. You'll notice the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, standing right next to the president, was very careful not to have any expression on his face right there. Look, I asked senior White House officials, whether was the president trying to make J.D. Vance own this by, having him come out to Switzerland to sign for this formal ceremony, which, by the way, he left open, the president today, that it may or may not actually happen. But from what I'm told from a senior White House official, that the president is doing his best to sell this agreement. He has been repeatedly on camera today through social media that he feels that he is the best messenger here and that he is trying to sell this agreement as best he can. The president always likes to joke around in that sense. And yes, there are a lot of questions about whether the vice president, if this doesn't work out, could he end up being the fall guy? The president seemed to play along with that speculation, at least today.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez starting us off today. Gabe, thank you so much, traveling with the president there. Matt, I want to turn to you. Of course, the United States launched strikes along with Israel. And so there is an important component here in terms of what Israel's reaction is to all of this. I do want to play some of what the president said about Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Take a look.
We did send a copy to Israel, by the way. They've been a good partner. Again, I think they could do better with respect to Hezbollah. I love them as a partner. They were terrific. But they could do a much better job with Hezbollah. On that, I don't think they're doing well. Look, think of what Israel's getting. They're not going to be nuked. It's very simple. I told Bibi, your biggest risk was that they drop a nuclear weapon into the middle of Israel. They'd only need one, and there would be no more Israel. Think of it, baby. You got the most important thing that you were asking for is then. So I think they're happy.
So what has the reaction been in Israel based on conversations with your sources, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't heard anything yet, really, from the past 2 hours, from those comments that you just played from President Trump speaking at the G7 summit. But, you know, a lot of what the president said, except for when he said that when he revealed that he had actually given over a copy of the MOU to the Israelis, which he hadn't done before, amazingly. You know, a lot of what we've been hearing from the president at the G7 was kind of repeats from what we'd heard earlier in the week. And I can tell you that the criticism against Netanyahu here in Israel has been scathing. From all angles, the prime minister has been getting it, from his allies and his rivals, all of them saying that the prime minister has looked weak, that he dragged the country into a war that yielded no results, and that he really didn't stand up to the president when it came to fighting in Lebanon, which there are many, many people here and in the security establishment here in Israel who want to see the prime minister finish the job against Hezbollah. They've made this very clear. And even the head of the military, the chief of staff, has announced, along with Netanyahu, that Israel is not going to be withdrawing its troops from Lebanon. This fight looks like it's set to continue. So the problem that President Trump has here is that Prime Minister Netanyahu is one of the biggest stakeholders, the biggest stakeholder in this war, to have had no interaction, even at all, no contribution to the negotiating process that led to this memorandum of understanding and will presumably lead to a more permanent ceasefire. But he is the person who has the biggest chance to scuttle all of the progress that's been made. If the prime minister goes back to fiercely fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon and, for example, fires missiles into the outskirts of Beirut, that would anger Iran and could set off another crossfire over the entire Middle East and could really sabotage this deal.
Well, it's a really good point, Matt, and you take me to my following question, which is what about the fact that the president says Iran will be allowed to keep some missiles? How is Israel responding to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that a lot of folks have already been hitting on. And again, we didn't hear in response from the president's most recent comment about 2 hours ago at the G7. But I can tell you it's been part of just a group of different complaints that everybody has been firing together all at once at the prime minister. There are some major things that the prime minister had assured the Israeli public he was going to achieve with this war and with its conclusion that are now left gaping open. The resolution to Iran's nuclear future, the missiles, the ballistic missiles, and Iran's funding for proxy groups across the region. All of these have not been answered in this MOU.
All right, Matt Bradley, traveling in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Matt. Please stay safe. We really appreciate it. Sahil, let me turn to you on Capitol Hill. You're getting reaction from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, and the chief complaint seems to be there's a lack of details in this memorandum of understanding, the language that's been released so far. What are you hearing?
Well, Kristen, I think we can safely call the reaction a mixed bag. I will say in the last few hours, since some of the details of this MOU have come out, I've heard more criticism than praise. And let's start with Republicans. I think the most interesting fault line here breaks down between those who are essentially free agents, no longer have to worry about the politics or crossing President Trump, and those who are conscious of the politics and want to align with President Trump. To that end, take a listen to what Senator Bill Cassidy said. He's a free agent, no longer running for re-election, retiring. Take a look.
It's going to leave Iran stronger. It's going to leave our allies weak, and it may commit U.S. taxpayer dollars. Now Iran recognizes that they can use their leverage of the Strait of Hormuz to extract from the other countries of the world whatever they want. This is JCPOA plus. And I opposed it then, I oppose it now.
That JCPOA line was Bill Cassidy comparing it to President Obama's Iran deal 11 years ago that Republicans vehemently opposed. Now there's Senator Lindsey Graham, a close Trump ally who is running for re-election with Trump's endorsement this fall. He had a different take. Quote, it's my opinion that signing the MOU will be beneficial to the United States inasmuch as the Strait of Hormuz will begin to open and the hostilities with Iran will stop. Graham goes on to say whether or not the United States can reach an acceptable, verifiable deal with Iran regarding its nuclear program and other issues is yet to be determined, but I see little downside to trying, end quote. Notice how Graham qualifies his praise there, saying it's all contingent on getting a final deal. Now, The Democrats, the prevailing feeling there is that this deal is going to be worse than the JCPOA, that at this point Iran is negotiating from a position of greater strength than they were 11 years ago because they've executed the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and imposed economic pain on the United States and the world. And in the views of Democrats, it's working. Senator Richard Blumenthal called this a disgraceful deal, an unconditional surrender by the United States, took issue with the $300 billion windfall, the unenforceable promises, and Senator Chris Murphy went a little further, calling it a total humiliation for the United States, even a necessary humiliation in Chris Murphy's words, because he thinks any deal has to be taken to end this war, given that, in his view, Iran is only going to get stronger.
Well, incredibly strong reaction in these opening hours of us seeing that memorandum of understanding. Sahil, thank you for your reporting from Capitol Hill. Dan and Elise, you're both with me on set. Dan, give us the reality check. 60 days to get a deal done with Iran. It took the Obama administration 2 years. Is it possible?
I would say I would not put my money on it. Okay. And the MOU does say that if both parties are still ready to keep talking, they can extend it another 6 days. Forever. On and on, right? But these are incredibly technical issues. As you say, that agreement under the Obama administration was so technical, so complicated, and every concession had to be extracted, with brutal, kind of painful negotiations. So I don't think 60 days will produce a historic deal.
Yeah, it can't. I mean, that deal, look, the framework deal took about 6 to 8 months, and then that larger deal took 2 years, and it was hundreds of pages. But Dan and I have the text in our hot little hands, and it has all these Easter eggs that are, really incredible.
What stands out to you, Lisa? What are you focused on? Having seen this, having listened to the president,
right?
Where does this go from here?
Listen, this is a deal to open the strait, okay? And it's a framework.
The strait was open before the war began, by the way.
It was. So it's what they say in diplomatese that Dan and I talk about is back to the status quo ante, right? It's back to February 27th, right? And this is a framework deal and a pinky swear to negotiate the nuclear program. Now, look, if it ends the war and you go back to, the economy settles, the strait opens, there's no more conflict in the region, the economy improves for Americans, that's a good thing. And Iran's program was severely, damaged. The missile program, the weapons silos, the industrial base was damaged. So, yes, this is not as strong as the JCPOA, and it's very unlikely that they're going to get that kind of deal because, as we've been talking about, this is the best deal that the president could get. Yeah. The JCPOA was the best deal that the U.S. could get at the time, and the costs have gone up because of, now the Strait of Hormuz is the new nuclear weapon. But Iran is maybe in a politically stronger position. And, the old Ayatollah didn't want to use the strait. But it's also, weapons-wise and, I would say militarily-wise, it's in a weaker position.
So, Dan, how are the United States Gulf partners reacting in this moment? Elise lays out the fact that Iran actually may be more emboldened than it was during the negotiations over the JCPOA.
They are relieved, I think, for the most part. They could not absorb yet more warfare, more bombing, more damage to their oil and natural gas infrastructure, to their economies. They have all these elaborate plans to diversify their economies. This has thrown a wrench in that. So they were slightly desperate for the war to end. However, they're full of anxiety. They don't know if this will last. There isn't a serious treaty or agreement here. This is just a memorandum. Will Israel continue to bomb Lebanon? And will that then trigger all of this to unravel? So I think there's a lot of concern in the Gulf.
Elise, one of the focuses of the president's Republican allies, quite frankly, was this idea of unfreezing Iranian assets. Now we're hearing about a $300 billion reconstruction fund. Is the idea that that will be gifted over time once the administration sees progress? And how can the United States assure that that's what's actually happening?
Dan and I were talking about this earlier. So initially, on day one, when the deal is signed, the blockade is opened, Iran gets some waivers to sell oil.
Off the bat.
And, for a little while, the strait will open without some tolls. What happens going forward? We really don't know. Iran gets the major benefits, whether it's lifting sanctions, unfrozen assets, this reconstruction fund, the more they engage in negotiations, and then there's a final deal. But, you know, J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, said something very interesting yesterday to Megyn Kelly on her show. And he said, listen, you know, if this is all we could get, you know, Iran doesn't get any more benefits, and we open the strait and the war is over and everyone goes on with their lives. So I think that the U.S. is already bracing for the fact that these negotiations could go on indefinitely. They could stall. And let's be honest, if you look at what happened in Ukraine, if you look at what happened in Gaza, this is kind of par for the course with this administration is, look, they do try to negotiate, you know, an end to the conflict, but the president, you know, gets impatient. He moves on. He's talking about Cuba. I mean, I don't see these negotiations really going anywhere anytime fast.
Dan, very quickly, what are you going to be watching for in these next 60 days?
I would like to hear more about what has been promised to Iran about unfreezing assets and where's that money, $300 billion, coming from to rebuild Iran. But I would just make one last point here, which is this administration has embraced the concept of negotiation that they criticized President Obama for embracing, which is you, Iran, will limit your nuclear work, and in return, we will ease sanctions. And they've really embraced that idea.
And they can do pretty much, it says, I mean, that they could do whatever they want with the money. So, you know, back to the missiles and the proxies, it says, like, you know, the central bank will determine, you know, where the money goes.
And I thought it was notable, you heard President Trump effectively say none of this is binding. They'll do it because I'll start bombing them if they don't.
Not if he takes the troops out and, you know, the midterms are coming and the troops are home. It'll be difficult to do that again.
All right. Elise and Dan, thank you so much for your great insights and reporting. We really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.